A store that once sat within a 5-minute drive of 94% of all Americans now exists almost nowhere at all. This is the autopsy of RadioShack, the electronics chain that stocked the parts for the future and then forgot to sell itself one. The patient was born in the year 1921 in Boston, Massachusetts. Two brothers, Theodore and Milton Deutschman, opened a single store selling equipment to amateur radio operators. The name came from the small wooden room on a ship where the radio gear was kept, a space the crew called the RadioShack. Its first customers were hobbyists, tinkerers, and ham radio enthusiasts who wanted the one part no ordinary store carried. For decades, the company mailed out catalogs full of tubes, wires, speakers, and the small components that made electronics work. By the early 1960s, the business had overreached on-store credit and was quietly sliding toward insolvency. Enter Charles Tandy, a Texas leather goods magnate with a talent for retail and a taste for turnarounds. Tandy bought the ailing chain for roughly $300,000 and dragged it back from the edge. He cut the sprawling catalog, killed the credit that was bleeding it, and focused the shelves on things people actually bought. He understood something simple, that a small store on every corner could sell high-margin gadgets to a nation falling in love with electronics. Under Tandy, the store multiplied across strip malls and main streets at a pace few retailers had ever matched. Then, in the year 1977, the company placed a bet that briefly made it a pioneer. It released the TRS-80, one of the first mass-market personal computers an ordinary person could buy off a shelf. For a moment, RadioShack sat at the very front edge of the home computer revolution, selling the future for cash. The company also sold its own house brands, names like Realistic, Optimus, and Tandy, keeping the margins for itself. The patient was young, profitable, and standing exactly where the world was about to go. At its peak, RadioShack operated more than 7,200 stores across the United States. The company liked to boast that 94% of Americans lived or worked within 5 minutes of one of its locations. Annual revenue climbed toward $5 billion, and for over a decade it stayed above $4 billion every single year. The green and red sign became one of the most familiar sights in all of American retail. If your remote needed an odd battery, your stereo needed a cable, or your project needed a resistor, you went to RadioShack. The stores were small, densely packed, and staffed by people who often knew exactly which part you needed. This was the company's quiet superpower, expertise you simply could not find at a department store. A customer walked in confused and walked out with the exact adapter and a reason to come back. The company sold batteries by the wall, cables by the bin, and gadgets no one else bothered to stock. It also developed a habit that would become the stuff of legend, asking every customer for a name and address at checkout. You bought a single 9-volt battery, and the clerk asked for your phone number and your home address. It was intrusive, it was famous, and it became a running joke across the entire country. But underneath the jokes, the company was printing money on small parts with enormous markups. The knowledgeable staff, the tiny footprint, and the sheer ubiquity formed a machine that looked unstoppable. For a whole generation of engineers and hobbyists, RadioShack was where a career quietly began. It supplied the wires for science fairs, the speakers for garage bands, and the chips for 1,000 basement inventions. The company had a moat that money could not easily buy, trust and convenience on every corner. And yet, at the very height of this empire, the ground beneath it was already shifting. The parts business that built RadioShack was becoming a smaller and smaller slice of what people wanted to buy. The patient was thriving and had absolutely no idea what was about to arrive. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, two forces arrived at once. The first was the internet, where a company called Amazon had begun selling everything to everyone. RadioShack did not open a real online store until the year 2000, roughly 6 years after Amazon began. In the parts business, an entire generation of customers simply moved their buying to a browser. The second force was the mobile phone, and here RadioShack made the decision that would kill it. Cell phones and wireless plans carried fat commissions, and the company chased them with everything it had. Store shelves that once held components were cleared to make room for phones and carrier contracts. The staff whose job had been to help you build things were retrained to sell you a 2-year plan. The drawers of resistors and capacitors were shoved to the back, dusty and forgotten. Management looked at the numbers, saw wireless revenue rising, and called it a strategy. What they had actually done was trade away the one thing that made RadioShack worth visiting. A store you went to for expertise became a store you went to for a phone you could buy anywhere. And a phone, unlike a rare capacitor, was sold on every corner and every website in America. RadioShack had walked into the most crowded, lowest loyalty market in retail and bet the company on it. Worse, the wireless business tied its fate to the carriers, who could change the deal at any time. When carrier commissions tightened, the revenue that had propped up the whole plan began to sag. Meanwhile, the hobbyists, the engineers, and the tinkerers who had always come back stopped coming at all. The company had fired its own reason to exist and replaced it with a commodity. The cause of death was now written, even if the patient would take years to feel it. RadioShack had confused the thing that made money today with the thing that made it matter. What followed was a decade of management churn and turnaround plans that never turned anything around. A parade of chief executives arrived, each promising a fresh strategy, each leaving the patient sicker. One leadership team leaned even harder into wireless and redesigned the stores around selling phones. Those redesigns pushed the last of the core customers quietly out the door. In the year 2009, the company tried to fix its image with a name. It rebranded itself as The Shack, hoping a younger, cooler label would change its fortunes. Customers did not want a cooler name. They wanted a reason to walk in, and the rebrand gave them none. The store still sat on every corner, but the corners now led to Amazon and to big box electronics chains. Sales slid, then slid again, and the quarterly losses began to stack up like unpaid bills. The company cut costs, closed locations, and washed its cash reserves thin with every passing season. It had thousands of stores, and no clear answer to the question of why any of them should exist. The wireless bet had aged into a liability, and the parts business it abandoned had walked away for good. Attempts to sell gadgets, toys, and accessories could not fill the hole where the identity used to be. Each holiday season arrived with hope and departed with another disappointing report. The stock, once a Wall Street favorite, drifted toward the low single digits. By the year 2014, the company announced plans to close roughly 1,100 stores. It strung together 11 consecutive quarterly losses, a streak that told investors the bleeding would not stop. The patient was now visibly dying, and everyone in the room could see it. In a final act of grim self-awareness, RadioShack bought a Super Bowl commercial in the year 2014. The ad, called "The 80s Called," showed pop icons of the 1980s storming in to take their store back. The joke was that RadioShack looked hopelessly stuck in the past, and the company was in on it. The commercial was clever, it was funny, and it was far too late to matter. Being self-aware about your own decline is not the same thing as reversing it. On the 5th of February, in the year 2015, RadioShack filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. It had been 94 years since two brothers opened a radio store in Boston. The company was delisted from the New York Stock Exchange, its long run on Wall Street finally over. A deal carved up the corpse, keeping the brand alive in a co-branding arrangement with the wireless carrier Sprint. A firm called General Wireless took over roughly 1,700 of the surviving stores. The stores that remained were a shadow, half retailer and half phone kiosk, with no clear soul. The decline did not pause for the new owners, and the losses simply continued under new letterhead. In March of the year 2017, the company filed for bankruptcy a second time. The vast majority of the remaining stores went dark, and the corner store vanished from the corner. What survived was a brand name, licensed and traded, haunting the internet where its stores used to sell parts. The patient that 94% of Americans once lived 5 minutes from was, for all practical purposes, gone. So let us record the official cause of death for RadioShack. The company did not die because people stopped buying electronics. They bought more electronics than ever before. It died because it abandoned the one thing it did better than anyone, and chased a business anyone could do. It traded expertise and trust for commissions and contracts, and the market repaid it exactly what that was worth. The lesson on the certificate reads simply, "A moat you fill in yourself is the hardest kind to ever rebuild." RadioShack had a store on every single corner, and forgot to give anyone a reason to turn it. This has been the Corporate Autopsy. So subscribe before the next patient reaches the table, and stay curious about how the money really dies.